Hey everybody, this is Neil from neilcollins.de. Welcome to another business English coaching and training video tip. Today I want to talk about feedback and how to give feedback in English, particularly when that feedback is critical. So this is quite an interesting one because there's a lot of people here who can do this very well in German, and when they come they have to do it in English to their, because they work in an international team or with international employees, they find it not so easy. They forget the process because they're concentrating on their English, or they remember the process, but maybe they don't have, or they're not using the appropriate or the correct phrases in English. So I want to talk about those two things, a little bit about the process or a process, one example of how you can give feedback, and also I want to give you some language, some phrases that you can use. So just quickly, one process or one way to give feedback would be, first of all, to describe a behavior, an observable behavior that you've seen that you would like to criticize. The second thing would be to talk about a specific example of that. So a specific example with the time and the place where this behavior was observable. The third thing you could do is to talk about the consequences of that action, what happened because of that action. And the fourth thing you could do is find an alternative way to behave and, find an agreement or get an agreement with your team member so that you can do this in a different way the next time. So I'll just write those 4 steps up first. The first step would be to describe. So describe an observable behavior. You want to criticize. Now, of course, when you're giving feedback, it could also be that you want to encourage this behavior or reward this behavior. But in this video, I want to focus on when you need to give feedback in order to criticize or in order to change that behavior. The second step would be to talk about a specific example. And in this specific example or situation, you should say, it's important to say a time and a place. So a specific example with the time and place when this behavior was noticeable. Okay, the third step would be to describe the consequences of this behavior, of this action. So describe the consequences of this action. And then the last step would be to find an alternative and get an agreement on this. Okay, so these would be, some typical steps on how you can give feedback when you want to be critical. Now let's look at the phrases that you can use, the English that you can use during this process. So in the first step, when you want to describe observable behavior that you'd like to criticize, you could use a phrase like, I've noticed that. So for example, I've noticed that your customer service skills have not been as good as they were before. Or I've noticed that your telephone manner has not been as good as before. Let's imagine a situation where a team member has had some issues or some problems with the client on the phone. Well, you could start by using this phrase here, I've noticed that. I've noticed that your customer service skills have not been as good as before. In the second step, when you want to talk about a specific example with a time and a place, I think this is important because it's very easy for this situation, especially with a critical situation, to become emotional and to lose focus. I start talking about one thing and then the other person starts talking about another, and then suddenly you start you bringing in all these other topics and people get emotional, and perhaps you could lose control of the conversation. So it's important to talk about a specific time and a place when this behavior was observable. So you could say something like, on Tuesday the 8th of October. So talking about a time, on Tuesday the 8th of October, you were here in the office, or you were working an early shift here, talking about the place. You were here, or you were on an early shift here. And now, a specific example of this behavior that you want to criticize. So on Tuesday the 8th of October, you were here. Let's say client B called you. Client B called, there was a 5-minute conversation. Again, you're talking about facts here. There was a 5-minute conversation, and client B became angry and hung up. Okay, so what you're doing here, again, talking about the time and the place, and just basically using past simple verbs. You're describing like a sequence of events in past simple. Client B called, there was a 5-minute conversation, client B became angry and hung up. Okay, the next step in this, to describe the consequences of this action, you could say something like, as a result, or because of that. So for example, as a result of this conversation, client B wanted to end the contract, and I had to spend one whole afternoon talking to client B. I needed to explain, I needed to apologize and to explain the situation and try and basically try and find a solution. And because of that, I lost one whole afternoon and I missed a deadline, and I'm talk about the consequences for you. I'm very upset that this happened. Okay, so as a result or because of that, I had to, or I needed to, and I think it's okay to talk about the emotional consequences, but probably it's a better idea to focus it on yourself. I'm very upset about this. And then in the last part, you could find an alternative and get an agreement. So you could say, for example, so the next time this happens, what can we do? Or how could you deal with this in a different way the next time it happens? And perhaps, you know, your team member might say, well, it's true, in this situation I became angry and I became emotional, and perhaps I lost control of the conversation. And they might say something like, you know, the next time maybe I could ask the client to wait a minute or two so I can calm down, or I could pass the call on to a colleague who is in a more relaxed state. So as a phrase or as a question that you can use, here you could say, what could we do the next time? What can or what could we do the next time? Or how can we deal with this the next time? Or how can we deal with this differently? And then the last part, you know, get an agreement. So you could finish the meeting by saying, so the next time this happens, you promise to take a break and calm down, or you promise to pass this call on to a colleague. So next time this happens, you promise to... And then of course, then you need to, whatever the agreement is, you obviously need to make sure that afterwards that you both stick to that agreement. And especially if you need to observe if these situations happen again, and if there's a different way or an improvement in how your team member deals with this. So I hope the video helped you, and all I can say is good luck when you're giving feedback, and take these phrases and try and use them. And if you like the video, as always, please hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you soon. Hi everyone, if you want to see more video tips like this, just click on these videos here. Go on, do it now.